So we are going to go ahead and get started with tonight's webinar seminar. Just to make sure you are in the correct place, this is our firearm safety webinar, and this information is specifically for those that are brand new to guns. Maybe you're thinking about getting into firearms, or perhaps you have some questions and you're looking for a way to review the information, then you're in the right place. This is going to be very, very high level. So I do invite you to ask your questions and we'll try to get all of those answers for you. I anticipate we'll be on the line for about an hour, maybe a little bit more, but hopefully you will get out of this what you are looking for. So before I jump in, if one of you wouldn't mind just giving me a thumbs up or clicking in the chat to let me know that you can see the presentation, I would really appreciate that. Just want to know if you can see the presentation and if everyone is able to hear me. Perfect. Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joy Allen. I, along with my husband, own E3 Personal Defense and Security, which is a firearms training company here based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been shooting since the very end of 2015, so I am not a veteran by any means of shooting. I enjoy teaching classes, enjoy some entry level or lower level competition, and this is something that I'm passionate about, especially getting information out to the community for those who may not have access to that information. So hopefully you'll hear my passion come out today. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to jump in and let me know what those questions are. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have quite a few things to talk about tonight, and again, at a very high introductory level. We're going to discuss first and foremost gun safety. It's very, very important. We'll then talk about the different types of firearms. We'll discuss ammunition briefly, just so you understand what it is and how it works. Then we're going to talk about purchasing a firearm. What types of things should you consider when you get ready to buy a gun? We'll follow that up with training opportunities, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time there because I realize a lot of people just aren't sure which training is the best to take and in what order. So I'm going to try and clarify that for you on this evening. We'll touch a little bit on visiting the gun range, what you should expect and what you need to have in order to do so. We'll also talk about legal protection and the reason that you need to consider it if you're going to have a firearm or any other weapon. And then we'll close out with non-lethal options. Ultimately, you need to have something between harsh language and a firearm. So we're going to discuss those options for you tonight as well. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into what I consider to be the most important topic, and that is the topic of gun safety. Regardless of what type of gun you have, at some point you want to put to memory the 4 universal gun safety rules. Number 1, treat every single gun as if it's loaded. It doesn't matter whether you know that the gun is unloaded. If you always treat it with the respect that is due to a firearm, you will avoid having a negligent discharge or an accident. So again, number 1 is we're going to treat every gun as if it's loaded all the time. Number 2, we're going to be careful never to point that gun at anything you're not willing to destroy. You always want to be mindful of the safe direction or the safest possible direction in your situation, and that's the only direction where you ever want to point a gun. So again, never point that muzzle at anything you're not willing to shoot and destroy. Rule number 3, you're going to keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to take the shot. We never want our fingers dancing around inside that trigger guard. So you want to keep your finger as far away from the trigger as possible until you are sure that you are on target and ready to pull that trigger. Last but not least, always be aware of your target and everything beyond your target. So the thing that you're shooting at, you want to make sure you're also aware of what's above it, what's below it, to the right, to the left, just to ensure that nothing is ever hit by accident. So again, of all the things that we're going to cover tonight, this is probably the most important slide. This is not proprietary information. These are universal gun rules for a reason. Everybody knows them. Everyone should be following them. So I encourage you to please commit them to memory. A few other things you want to consider when it comes to safety, in addition to those 4 universal gun rules. Know your gun whenever you're using it. Make sure you are comfortable using it safely, that you know what it does and you know how to operate it. Obviously, many of you may be brand new to guns, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. If you don't know how to use it, you can get help. You can have someone support you so that you're not starting out by yourself. Also, be sure the gun is safe to operate. Is it clean? Has it been maintained if needed? Has anyone looked at it to make sure that all the parts are in working order? You don't want to pull the trigger behind something that may have mechanical issues. Be sure that you're using the proper ammunition for your firearm. You should not be putting anything in your gun that the gun was not meant to cycle. So that's very, very important. Another thing that's important, especially when you're going to the range to shoot, you want to make sure that you are protecting your eyes and your ears. It only takes a single accident for you to lose your sight or your hearing. So it's very important that whenever you're shooting, you are protecting your eyes and protecting your ears with the proper eye and ear protective gear. Never try to catch a falling gun. Firearms in general are drop proof with the exception of some shotguns. So your chances of being safe are much better if you let that gun hit the ground. If you try to catch it when it's falling, chances are that your finger may come in contact with that trigger and you would thereby violate one of our main safety rules. So never, ever, ever attempt to catch a falling gun. Make sure that your guns are stored in such a way that no unauthorized persons will have access. That includes children as well as anyone else who may be barred from access to a firearm, whether that's a legal issue, a mental issue, or otherwise. Please, please, please make sure your firearms are always locked away and secured so that anyone who should not have access does not have access. Last but not least, we shouldn't have to say it, but we certainly do. Drugs and alcohol never, ever, ever mix with firearms. If there is any inkling of alcohol or drugs in your system, you want to leave the firearms alone. And that's how we are going to stay safe. Now that we've touched on safety, and again, I'm going to move a little quickly tonight, so feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me if you have a question or put your question in the chat. We're going to move on from safety now and talk about the different types of firearms because it's important for us to understand that you do have choices and each of these choices has a purpose. When we talk about firearms, there are basically two categories and they're not very difficult to understand. Long guns and then handguns. Handguns are also called pistols, right? And the difference between a long gun and a handgun or a pistol is basically the stock. The stock is the real estate on the gun that sits behind the trigger. So essentially, if there's a lot of space between your body and the trigger that's filled up by real estate, you're probably shooting a long gun. Otherwise, you're probably shooting a pistol. A pistol is designed by the manufacturer to be shot and handled with a single hand, although it's always best practice to do so with two hands if possible. Of the long guns, the main two types are shotguns and rifles. The biggest difference between shotguns and rifles are a couple things. One is the type of ammunition that feeds through each one. And then two is the type of shooting that you're looking to do. Rifles tend to be used for longer distances at higher power, whereas shotguns tend to be used for shorter distances, which is why they tend to be ideal for home defense. Your handguns and your pistols also have two types, revolvers and semi-automatics. Revolvers we know as wheel guns because they have that revolving cylinder. And then semi-automatics we identify by the slide that allows that gun to cycle through the entire firing sequence. I have a question in the chat. It says, is it true that a license is not needed to purchase a shotgun? Yes, that is completely true. When we talk about a license, I do want to clarify, I'm talking about a pistol purchase permit, okay? In order to purchase a handgun right now in the state of North Carolina, I'm just talking about North Carolina, you have to go to the sheriff's office and apply for a pistol purchase permit. Each of those permits, once it's granted, will allow you the opportunity to purchase one firearm. So one permit per handgun. If you have a concealed carry, then that concealed carry cancels out your need for pistol purchase permits. But to the point or the question that has been presented, if you are purchasing a long gun, a shotgun or a rifle, you do not need a pistol purchase permit. Now, I do want to clarify that regardless as to whether or not you have a pistol purchase permit, there will be a background check that is run. So even though you can buy a rifle or a shotgun without that permit, you are still going to have a background check run, just not through the sheriff's office. But both of those purchases have a background check that must be run by the FFL or the person that you are purchasing from. Okay. Someone asked the question, what's the difference between a centerfire and a rimfire pistol? I'll touch on that a little later, so remind me if I forget, but we're going to talk about ammunition and I'll touch on that question at that time. Okay, let's look a little bit at some of the long guns. So tonight, don't expect you to memorize all the parts, just want you to see that long guns and pistols or handguns really have pretty much the same parts. They just operate slightly different. But if you can shoot one and learn one, you can likely learn and shoot the others as well. So you'll see here on the screen a long gun and the typical parts of the long gun. You'll see that the stock is highlighted there, along with the barrel that you would expect to see and the trigger. You'll see the muzzle, which is basically the end of the barrel where the bullet comes out. And this is kind of what a long gun is going to look like. If we look at our revolver, a handgun, which is what we call our wheel gun, right? You'll see the parts here. And again, the distinguishing factor with a revolver is the revolving cylinder. There are some advantages to shooting a revolver as opposed to a semi-automatic, mainly that it is a simpler machine overall. There's no slide to manipulate. It's very, very accurate, and you have a very wide variety of calibers that come as options on a revolver. Most people, however, choose a semi-automatic simply because they tend to have a lot more options. They are a sexier gun and option, if you will, a lot easier to conceal. And again, you know, just comfortable. Of course, you do have a slide, which is what distinguishes from a visual perspective, the semi-automatic versus the revolver. And again, you'll see the same parts that are here. So that's basically what the guns look like. Now, jumping into the ammunition, and I'll address the centerfire versus rimfire question here. When we talk about ammunition, we first want to make sure that our vernacular is correct. We don't refer to our ammunition as a bullet. The bullet is only a part of the ammunition. So the correct terminology is to refer to it as a cartridge or a round. Okay, so either of those will certainly work for you. In the diagram here, you can see that every cartridge basically has 4 parts, whether you have a cartridge such as you see on the left, which is a pistol cartridge, or a cartridge as you see on the right, which is a rifle cartridge. The projectile, which is the part usually made of some sort of metal alloy, the part that exits the muzzle end of your gun when you take the shot, that is called the bullet, and only that part is called the bullet. The outside of it is called the casing. So that brass piece of metal that goes around it, or in some cases aluminum, that is called the case or the casing. Inside the case, there's a powder charge, and at the base of that particular cartridge, you'll see a primer. Okay, and I'm going to show you the difference now between that rimfire and centerfire bullet, or excuse me, I'm saying wrong, cartridge. So as you can see in the diagram, if we look at the diagram over to the right, the base of that cartridge, you see the little pin to the left, that is representing our firing pin. The firing pin is what comes in contact with the cartridge when we pull the trigger and that trigger breaks, or the trigger is pulled to the rear. The firing pin hits the base of the cartridge right where the primer is, and that causes a chemical reaction that some will refer to as a small explosion. As that explosion increases and as that powder is ignited, it creates an immense amount of pressure inside your barrel. And because of that pressure, your bullet has to go somewhere. So it is forced out of the muzzle end of your gun. And that is basically how the ammunition works. Now, the only difference between a centerfire round and a rimfire round is where the primer is located. In a pistol cartridge such as a .22 LR caliber, that is a rimfire cartridge, and what happens is the firing pin actually hits it around the edge because those cartridges are made with the primer distributed around the edge. So the firing pin hits the edge, crushing it, and that's what causes the chemical reaction. The problem with that is because the primer is distributed around the edge, it's not always consistent. And for that reason, you're going to have occasional misfires. Based on my experience, I would say 1 out of every 100 to 150 rounds is going to go click with no boom, right? So that is why when it comes to personal defense, we always recommend a center fire cartridge, which means the primer is in the center, concentrated in the bottom center of that cartridge. That increases the probability that when my firing pin hits the cartridge, I'm going to get a boom. Okay, and so I hope that answers your question. That is the difference. It's basically where the primer is located on the cartridge or within the cartridge. Okay. That is something you want to consider when you're purchasing a firearm as well. So again, if you're purchasing something for defense, we're talking about a handgun here, you want to make sure that it is a center fire cartridge. All right. Perfect, perfect. Let's talk about going shopping. One of the things I love to do when it comes to firearms, I'm not much of a shopper outside of that. But when you go to purchase your firearm, you want to think about purchasing shoes. It's very much the same. And the reason I like to use this analogy is because we can all relate, right? We don't all have one pair of shoes that we wear for every occasion. I love my stilettos for church. I love my pumps for work. I wear my tennis shoes to the gym. I don't have one set of shoes that I use for everything. However, I do have a few pair that can kind of work for almost everything. I have a flat pair of loafers that I can wear with jeans or a suit, for example. Very, very similar to how you're going to approach shopping for a firearm. I recommend that for your first gun purchase, you pick something that is going to tick off as many boxes as possible. Pick something that's going to fit as many needs as possible first, and then from there you can start to branch out. When you're shopping, you want to think about, just like you do when you're shopping for shoes, what is the purpose? What are you going to do with this gun? Is it just for competition? Is it for personal defense or home defense? Is it just for plinking and playing around? What is the purpose? Because that's going to help you determine what you should buy. Also consider price and value. How much do you have to work with in terms of a budget? Now, I will say this is not the time to cheap out, right? You don't want to buy the cheapest, most inexpensive thing necessarily. You actually want to get the best bang for your buck, though. And you want to get the best firearm that you can get within the confines of your budget. Think about the brand, just as you do when you buy your shoes. There are certain shoes we're not going to buy, but there are certain brands that we trust, right? We trust Converse, we trust Nike, Adidas, we trust those things. We trust Jimmy Choo. We know certain name brands, and we will stick to those when we buy our shoes, especially if we want them to last. The same applies when you're purchasing a firearm. Stick to what you know. Smith & Wesson, Colt, Ruger, Taurus, etc. This is not the time to be a guinea pig for some new gun manufacturer. That's not a good thing at this point. You also want to make sure the firearm fits. Are you able to fit it in your hand comfortably to assume a proper grip and still reach the trigger? Make sure the specifications are what you're looking for. Is it the correct caliber? Is it the correct size? And then last but not least, think about the style. This is going to be an investment for you. So when I talk about style, I'm thinking, do you like revolvers or do you really want a semi-automatic? Are you looking for a shotgun or do you really want a rifle? Think about the things that are going to help you to practice and become efficient with that firearm. And you want to consider those in your purchase. Any questions about anything I've covered so far? And I know we've covered a lot. All right, we'll continue on. We're going to talk now about training opportunities. So let's say you are ready to get started shooting, but you've never pulled a trigger before, or perhaps you have and you're just not quite sure what type of training you should go after. Here are my recommendations. Number one, ladies and gentlemen, it is very, very, very important to vet your instructors. I cannot tell you how many times I see people go to a firearms training class just because they have a seat available. You don't know what you don't know. Typically, people don't know that they have had a terrible trainer until 2 or 3 classes later. So you want to vet your instructors. Make sure you know their experience. You don't want to just go to someone's class and you've never heard of them. What is their experience? Are they able to shoot themselves? Are they practicing safe gun handling? I've seen instructors point guns at people. You want to make sure that you know who these people are that you're taking a class with. Do some research on their company. Is their firearms company actually legal and registered? If you cannot find them online in the North Carolina Secretary of State website, then you probably don't want to take a class from that person, right? You want to make sure also that they have insurance. Hopefully nothing will happen, but there are quite a few firearms instructors out here who do not have insurance. This is not the type of class you want to take from an uninsured instructor. Also, find reviews. Talk to someone who's taken a class with them previously and look online to see what the reviews look like. If they have no reviews, there is a reason. This is a very competitive industry, and so I guarantee you, firearms instructors want those reviews. They help us to get business. So if you're dealing with an instructor who has no reviews, that is a red flag. Think about those things. When you get ready to select your class, you also want to consider the cost. This is not an inexpensive sport if you're a person who's going to want to really get into shooting. So you want to think about what's covered in the class and does the cost make sense? In other words, do some comparative shopping. You don't necessarily want to take the least expensive course out there, but there are markets, right? And you want to look at the market for what you're taking to make sure that you are paying at least a fair price for the class that you are planning to enroll in. Look at the topics that are covered. Do they make sense for where you are in your firearms journey? If you're just getting started and you see a class that says we're going to be shooting timed drills, that might not be for you at that moment. So think about what's being covered, and every course description should make that very plain for you to see exactly what's going to be covered in the course. Look at what equipment is needed. Make sure that you have all of the equipment, and make sure that you are comfortable doing any exercises that might be described in that course description. You also want to pay attention to the standardization of these courses. When they are being offered, is there a standardization committee in play? For example, is this an NRA course, a USCCA course, a range master course? That's not to say that instructors can never write their own. I actually write a few of my own curriculum, but those curriculums still use materials and details that are confirmed and vetted by the NRA, the USCCA, NAAGA, and other organizations. So you want to make sure that what you're taking, that the information has been vetted and no one's just making something up, right? So look and see what standards are in place for the course. And then think about a progression plan. Those instructors should be able to tell you the next course to take in line. And even if they can't offer it, maybe direct you to an instructor who can. I can tell you that I offer quite a few beginner courses, an occasional intermediate one, not very many advanced or instructor courses yet, but I have contacts that I direct students to, and we just share that way. I provide them a funnel because I know those instructors are professional and vetted and will get my students what they need. So again, you don't want to take a class that's a one and done. You want to be able to develop a relationship with that instructor that is going to be beneficial to you moving forward, no matter how far you go. You always want someone that you can go to for questions, someone that you can bounce ideas off of, or even meet at the range to get some assistance. Very important that you're working with someone who's going to stick around. In terms of E3 personal defense, we do have a lot of classes on our website, so I just want to quickly go through the classes that are appropriate for beginners. If you are looking for a pistol or handgun course and you are a beginner, there are a few options. We have an introduction to handgun course that is 3 hours. It's usually from 6 to 9 on a weeknight. We also have the USCCA basic handgun course, which is about 6 hours. And then we offer the NRA Basics of Pistol Shooting course, which is a full day 8-hour course. So the first course is a curriculum that I have written that is basically approved by the USCCA. The second course is a USCCA standard, and the third is an NRA standard. So those are pistol courses we offer for brand new pistol shooters. If you are brand new to rifle and you are looking for a course, we offer the NRA First Steps course, which is a 3-hour option, and the NRA Basics of Rifle Shooting course, which is a full day option. We don't offer that second one too often because we do need an outdoor range, but we offer the first one and actually have some coming up this summer, and that can be done at an indoor range. So keep that in mind. Last but not least, everybody wants to know about concealed carry. Concealed carry is not a shooting course, okay? So you can take it if you are new to shooting. However, please know this caution. You are required in the state of North Carolina to pass a shooting qualification. You must be able to independently, that means without help. You cannot get help loading, no help aiming, none of that. You have to be able to independently use your firearm in a safe manner and shoot at 3, 5, and 7 yards. In order to do that, if you have never shot before, we strongly encourage that you take at least the Introduction to Handguns course or a private instruction session so that we can make sure that you have everything you need to pass that qualification. No matter who you take concealed carry with, it is possible to fail the class if you do not pass the shooting qualification. So you want to make sure that you can shoot before you take the class. I see a question in the chat that says, do any of the beginner courses involve a range? Actually, all of these courses involve range time. All of them include range time. The other thing you might want to know is the Introduction to Handguns course, the NRA Basics of Pistol Shooting course, and the 2 NRA rifle courses. You do not need to bring anything to class. For those with E3 personal defense, we actually provide all of the firearms and all the ammunition for those 4 classes. So that is something to know. For the USCCA basic handgun course, you would need your own firearm. And for the North Carolina concealed carry, you would need your own firearm or you would need to rent one. But for the others, we actually provide everything. So I hope that answers your question. Great question. Any other questions before we move on to what to do at the range? All right. So when you go to the range, just a few tips. You're very welcome. When you go to the range, at some ranges, we have what's called an RSO. So if you don't know what that means, it means Range Safety Officer. These are people whose sole responsibility is to keep you safe. They're not necessarily there to help you work on your gun or work on your shot. They are there to watch and make sure everyone stays safe. Now, not every range has a range safety officer, so it's always our own responsibility to be safe and to watch the others around us. I always give this word of caution, ladies and gentlemen. We shoot at public ranges. That means that anybody can walk in the door and shoot a gun. Those partitions at indoor ranges are not bulletproof. So we need to be cautious. And I just say that to say, if you see something unsafe, if you see something that doesn't feel right, leave. Say something to someone who's at the desk or to a range safety officer if applicable, but keep in mind, safety is always first. Now, when you get ready to go to the range, you might want to consider purchasing some sort of gun case or range bag. Most of the time, your firearm will come in a case, and that is absolutely sufficient to take with you to the range. You'll want to make sure you have your firearm and, again, the appropriate ammunition. Some ranges do have ammunition for sale, but keep in mind that those costs are a bit high right now. So I do recommend shopping around and trying to get ammunition for the best deals possible. Sometimes at ranges, because of limited supply, depending on which range you go to, you might actually pay a little bit more than you would if you had ordered it at some place that carries ammunition in bulk. So just keep that in mind. You will need targets. Most ranges do provide targets, and some of them charge a nominal fee for them. But you're also more than welcome in many cases to bring your own targets. So you can print them out, you can order them, lots of different options, but keep in mind you'll need targets. We talked about eye and ear protection earlier. Eye and ear protection are very, very important. Get some protection that you are comfortable with, especially when it comes to your ears. Some people like earmuffs. Personally, I use molded hearing protection that was custom made. Use whatever you need. And if you need to double up, especially at an indoor range, because they tend to be louder, please feel free to double up. What I mean by that is you can put foam in your ears, and then on top of that, you can add the muffs to help to muffle out any of the noise. Last but not least, consider taking a mentor, a friend, or a trainer with you. Quite a few trainers offer private instruction. I do as well, and pretty much everyone out there does. So if you're not comfortable going by yourself, take somebody along who has some shooting experience, or book a private session for someone that can help you to, improve on the skills that you're looking to improve on. Let's see, I've got a question that says, are the targets offered in the public ranges racially ambiguous? That is a great question. Some are not. So it depends on which range you go to. Most of them nowadays are racially ambiguous, but there are still a few that are questionable, I'll be honest. And a lot of times it depends on which targets that range has ordered at that particular time. The other question is the outdoor range available? So there are quite a few outdoor ranges. As you all know, E3, all of our classes right now are taught at Eagle One in Raleigh. There are two possibilities that are associated with Eagle One. They have one outdoor range that they were previously using, I believe, in the Zebulon area. But Eagle 2 is opening in just a couple of weeks. That is located in Henrico, North Carolina, Warrenton County, I believe, and that opens up in a couple of weeks. Also, there is an outdoor range called Kids that is in Harnett County. There's an outdoor range in Fuquay called, oh goodness, it just slipped my mind, and I go there for Well-Armed Woman meetings. But there's one in Fuquay. I can get that name for you if you like. And there are a few others scattered around within the state. There's a big one in Mebane. There's ENC that's about 45 minutes down the road. Quite a few other options as well if you want to shoot long guns. But again, Eagle 2 is open in Warrenton, North Carolina as well. Good questions. All right. Very quickly, I also want to touch on legal protection. If you are considering having a firearm or any other weapon, you want to consider legal protection. Now, I am not ashamed to say that I am a fan of USCCA. I'm certified by the USCCA, and I believe in their product. My coverage is with the USCCA. However, I will say this: there are two other big gamers out there that, yes, Drake Landing is the one. Thank you, Ralph. Drake Landing is the other range I couldn't think of. Thank you so much. So when it comes to personal protection for your ability to protect yourself, there are three major players in the game. The USCCA clearly is one of them. There's another company called CCW Safe and another company called US Law Shield. I'm going to be honest with you. I would love it if you signed up with USCCA and you contacted Debbie Devers and you joined the USCCA family. But even if you don't, get something. It's very, very important, because if you ever have to use that firearm or any other tool to defend yourself, chances are that if you follow the law, obviously, you'll be okay criminally. Charges hopefully won't be brought against you, but civilly you have no protection unless you have some sort of legal protection plan or insurance in place. That means that anybody can sue you if you, God forbid, shoot their child or their husband or their father. You have opened yourself up for ruin financially. So please, please, I ask you to consider USCCA, CCW Safe, US Law Shield. I am an official partner with the USCCA. But if you're interested in CCW Safe or US Law Shield, please let me know. I know representatives for both, and I'm happy to put you in contact with someone. But please, ladies and gentlemen, do not have a firearm without appropriate coverage. Moving on now to our last topic, let's talk about those non-lethal options. As I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, you need to have something between harsh words and a firearm. I actually love teaching non-lethal defense options. And this is another function that is offered through E3 Personal Defense. Especially you ladies, you might be interested to know that we actually offer empowerment parties. And this is something I love to do. Essentially, it's a home party. We do these for bridal events, for churches, for birthdays, whatever the case may be. And what we do is we book that party with you and some of your friends. It is free of charge. We come out and we show you all kinds of products that can be used for self-defense, and we actually have them for sale. We do not sell them online. We only sell them in person so that I can make sure you have been properly trained to use them. So if this is something you're interested in, let us know. And we are happy to come out and talk to your church, your group, or just your buddies and do an empowerment party, much like your typical home parties that you might see. Some of the options that you can consider, in addition to carrying a firearm: defensive keychains, personal alarms. The only caution with personal alarms is the only thing they're going to do is make noise, right? But we can couple that along with a complete EDC system. And when I say EDC, I mean everyday carry system. Pepper spray, that is my personal favorite. That is my backup option. I always, always, always have on my person both pepper spray and my firearm. Pepper spray is my favorite because it's very effective. It gives me distance between myself and my attacker, 4 to 6 feet typically. And it also lasts up to 45 minutes. That's 45 minutes that the person who's coming against me is not going to be able to see. They can't breathe. They feel like they are dying, although they are not. So I am a big, big, big fan of pepper spray. You also have your batons and combat weapons that you can carry if you need to use that blunt force to defend yourself. Stun guns are another popular option. I do want to note that stun guns are different than tasers. Tasers are not necessarily effective for civilians because they do require a lot of training. You must have a very exact shot, and they're very expensive. By the time I buy a taser, I'll just buy a handgun. So just keep that in mind. I am not a fan of tasers, but I do understand and support stun guns. Knives are another option, although I will say this with caution as well. Knives are one of the hardest things to use for self-defense. If you're going to carry a knife as your backup option, you need a lot of training, including some hand-to-hand combat training. And of course, fighting, being able to fight is another option. The caution there is you want to be in shape. And again, you need lots and lots of training. But think about your lifestyle, think about your preferences, and make sure that you have another option in addition to that handgun. You never want your handgun to be the only option because that is going to be only your option of last resort. Handgun, gun in general, even for home defense. We might want to assume in our minds that if someone breaks in, I'm just going to shoot, but there are many, many, many possibilities for gray area there. So even when it comes to your home protection, you want another option aside from that shotgun or that long gun. Someone asked the question, which pepper spray would you suggest? I only suggest 2 types. We at E3 Personal Defense, we carry a very, very strong version by Streetwise that is used by police officers. The only other version that I would recommend is called Sabre. That's one of the most popular that's out there. But one of those 2, either a Streetwise brand or Sabre, they're going to give you the best bang for your buck. And many of them also include dye, so that if that person is caught and they sit under, black light, that dye is going to tell on them. So those are the 2 that I absolutely recommend. Good question. If you all have any other questions on these, please feel free to email me. And again, we do sell these products also. So if you are interested in purchasing something, we only do so in person because we will make sure that we take the time to teach you how to use it before we exchange and finish that sale. Very important to us that you don't have anything you're not comfortable using. And with that, that concludes our overview. I do want to pause for a moment for any other questions or topics that I may have missed or neglected to bring up. Very good. I'm going to ask that you all just continue to support us. Thank you so, so much for your time. I hope this was helpful. Oh, I see some questions coming in. Let me pause here. Women's classes. Oh boy. So some of you already know that I am very, very, very passionate about training and educating women, not only to defend themselves, but helping ladies to understand their self-worth. If you're looking for women's classes, I do offer a few of them every quarter. But even more, I am the president of Inner Peace LLC, which is a women's or a ladies shooting club here in North Carolina. We're just starting to expand into multiple regions as chapters. If you're interested in learning about Inner Peace, please check us out online. That website is www.inherpeace.com. Inner Peace is INHERPIECE. INHERPIECE, innerpeace.com. Also, we have a Facebook group, so that is absolutely free to join. You can get in there and meet all the ladies, ask your questions, get lots of advice. We share tons of information. Just go to Facebook and look up Inner Peace, INHER, and then Peace is PIECE. You'll be asked some questions to vet you, and then you'll get into that Facebook group. So we would certainly love to have you join the discussion. I see someone found the Instagram account. Wonderful, wonderful. Feel free to join. And also, if you wouldn't mind connecting to us at E3 Personal Defense on social media, we would certainly appreciate that. Share that with your friends. And again, feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. With that, we will conclude tonight's webinar. I hope you learned something, and I thank you all so much for your time. Be safe, be blessed, and I hope to see you soon. Have a good night.